HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Recycled Citizen by Charlotte Macleod, read by Andi Arndt.
For Carol Brenner. Chapter 1. Coffee, Theonia? Mrs. Adolphus Kelling was a strong woman for her age and size. She managed to lift Dolph's great-aunt Matilda's Baroque silver pot without a quiver and pour without a splash. "Thank you, Mary dear." Mrs. Brooks Kelling stretched a graceful hand from the chaise lounge on which she was reclining like Madame Récamier to accept the ornate gold and green demitasse. "Sarah, what about you?" "I'd love some." Bulgy young Mrs. Max Bittersohn, née Kelling, caught her husband's stern eye and sighed. "You'd better make it mostly cream." "Good girl." Max collected 2 coffees, 1 black for himself, and brought them back to the chunky Biedermeier sofa on which he and his wife had been sitting. "Cheer up, Susala. It won't be long now." 37 days, said Brooks Kelling, who had done a good deal of work on breeding statistics, though mostly among the confusing spring warblers. "Right, Sarah." Sarah's Uncle Jeremy's wrathful pink face poked around from behind the wing of a Queen Anne chair. "Can't we let our dinner settle without dragging in the disgusting subject of obstetrics?" "What's so disgusting about babies?" snapped his cousin Dolph. "Unless they go from puling infancy straight into doddering dotage the way you did." "Now don't you boys start picking on each other," Mary intervened. "Come on, let's have some ideas. How are we going to raise that money?" Max, who was feeling rather overstuffed himself, looked from the overstuffed furniture to the overstuffed mantelpiece to the overstuffed whatnots in the corners. "What you need is an auction." "What you need is a lighted match," grunted Jem. There was merit in both suggestions, Sarah thought. Back in their Beacon Hill brownstones, the Kellings of yore had lived sedately enough. Once they'd emigrated to the surrounding suburbs, though, they'd been all too prone to hunt up architects with delusions of grandeur and tell them, in essence, let her rip. Sarah didn't know who'd perpetrated the monstrosity Dolph had inherited from great-uncle Frederick, but the designer hadn't been one to stint on space. Naturally, finding themselves stuck with so many excess rooms, the Kellings had felt it their duty to fill them up. By now the whole house was crammed with much that was good and more that was ghastly. She herself wouldn't mind owning that Empire chaise Cousin Theonia was occupying so decoratively at the moment. Theonia might well be coveting the coffee cups. However, nobody in his right mind would ever give house room to those inspirational mottos done in poker work on birch bark and framed in dried seaweed. Great-aunt Matilda's aesthetic leanings had found their ultimate outlet in seaweed. Her chef-d'oeuvre had been a wreath of bladderwort and kelp formed around a bent coat-hanger and preserved for posterity inside a heavy gilded frame whose glass bumped out in the middle, much as Sarah would be doing for another 37 days. She couldn't see the wreath from where she was sitting, and she was glad. Dolph didn't seem too keen on the idea of an auction. "We can't go peddling Uncle Fred's personal belongings to God knows who," he started to object. "Dear, nobody's said anything about personal belongings," said Mary. "But what about all this other stuff? I don't see why we shouldn't clear out enough so a person could walk into a room without cracking her shins every 3rd step." She'd never met the aunt and uncle who'd taken custody of little Adolphus after his parents were killed in a crash between the Norumbega trolley car and a runaway brewer's wagon. She'd attended 1 or 2 spiritualist meetings with Theonia, hoping Fred and Matilda would manifest themselves so she could give them a piece of her mind about how they'd browbeaten and brainwashed a helpless orphan child. But so far they'd been contrary in death as they had been in life. Theonia was all for having another go, but Mary's Irish Catholic upbringing made her reluctant to try again. Anyway, Mary had more urgent business on her mind. "Let's face it, Dolph, somebody's got to deal with the overflow sooner or later. Why shouldn't we get the good of it? We can use the money as well as the next one." "And a damn sight better than some," Dolph conceded, glaring at Jem from force of habit. "That's a matter of opinion," his cousin retorted cheekily. "Were you planning to pass the decanter, old bane of my boyhood, or are you planning to auction it off with the rest of the impedimenta?" "What the hell? Why not?" Dolph picked up the handsome piece of cut glass, shook his head sadly at the inch or two of red wine left in the bottom, and handed it over to Jem. "Won't have anything to put in it once you've swilled the dregs down your ungrateful craw. We've opened the last of Uncle Fred's port. Haven't we, Mary?" "2 bottles left, and you needn't start looking pitiful, Jem. I'm saving those for Dolph's birthday party in November." "Don't know what anybody wants to celebrate that for," Dolph growled, looking pleased nevertheless. "Go ahead, Jem, hog the last of it and rot your gut. I'm surprised you haven't died of a pickled liver long ago." "My liver is a happy liver," Jem replied without rancor. "Here's to your 70th, old crock, in case I'm too soused to make an appropriate toast when the day rolls round. Egad, that's a real milestone. Next stop the boneyard for you, my boy." "Nonsense," said Sarah. "Dolph will live to be 98 like great-uncle Frederick. Don't you agree, Brooks?" The neat little man who'd been occupying himself in jotting down some of the birch-bark mottos for the family archives gave a qualified assent. 90, I should say. Not much older. Dolph is pugnacious, but not cantankerous like Uncle Fred. It seems to me one might need that extra streak of general cussedness to hang on as long as Fred did." "Good point, Brooks," said Jeremy. "You've mellowed lately, Dolph. You'd better quit immersing yourself in good works to the exclusion of a little healthy debauchery now and then, or you'll go soft at the center as well as in the head." "That's a hell of a thing to say to a man when you've snaffled the last of his port," Max chided. "Okay, so Dolph and Mary have decided to hold an auction to weed out the dead wood and make some dough. What's next on the agenda?" "Wait a minute," Jem insisted. "They don't need money. They've got too much already. Almost too much, I mean," he amended hastily. Jem was, after all, a Kelling. "That shows all you know," said Mary. "I guess Dolph hasn't told you we're planning to expand our facilities." "Facilities? You're not by chance referring to that high-class junkyard you've been running? What's the matter? Are the empty beer cans piling up too fast for you?" "The Senior Citizens Recycling Center is doing just fine, thank you." Mary had once sold hats to Boston ladies, so it took more than a bit of ribbing from Jeremy Kelling to shake her equilibrium. "But there's so much more to be done. Boston has better facilities for helping its needy elders than a lot of other cities, but there are still far too many who aren't getting a square deal. There are subsidized apartments for those who have the resources, and shelters where the down-and-outers can find a bed if they're lucky. What we have in mind is a facility that fills the gap in the middle." "Would you care to tell us your plans?" said Brooks. "Well, you know, Dolph inherited various properties from his uncle. One's a smallish factory building that a paint company just moved out of. He's had a couple of offers from would-be buyers already. There's one real estate trust that's been pestering the life out of us, but we've turned them down. You see, what we hope to do is convert the building into something like a great big boarding house." "You mean make it into bedrooms?" said Sarah. "Essentially, yes. Cut it up into dozens of nice little rooms that people could rent for very small fees by the week or month. They'd have a reasonable degree of comfort and privacy, and a safe place to keep their possessions. That way, they wouldn't have to tote everything they own around in shopping bags and never know where they're going to sleep at night." "We're charging the rent to keep them from feeling like objects of charity," said Dolph. "If they don't have the money, we'll find ways for them to earn their board by doing chores. Give 'em a sense of pride, keep 'em self-supporting to the best of their ability." "How big is this warehouse?" Brooks looked as if he might already be drawing blueprints in his head. "Big enough," said Dolph. "It's 4 stories high, 200 feet deep, and 600 feet long. We'll have room for several different kitchens, dining rooms, and recreation areas, so the tenants won't have to trek all over hell and gone to reach the facilities." "And plenty of bathrooms on every floor," said Mary. "But that will cost you millions," Theonia exclaimed.
"Dolph has millions,"
drawled Jeremy, holding the decanter upside down over his glass to catch the last drop of Uncle Fred's port.
"Not so many millions as you think I have," Dolph retorted. "Why don't you lick the stopper, you old soak? We'll have to run a major fund drive. Sarah can handle it."
"Me? Why don't you simply turn this mausoleum into a boarding house instead, the way I did with mine?"
"Because our people wouldn't come out here, that's why," said Mary. "Don't think Dolph and I haven't thought of that. We've brought a few SCRC members out here thinking they'd enjoy the change, but they hightail it back to the city the minute we give them the chance. They all claim they can't stand the quiet." "What quiet?" Jem demanded. "Birds squawking, leaves rustling, blasted squirrels chomping on acorns. All you have to do, Mary, is make a lot of asphalt paths through the grounds with wooden benches, like the ones on Boston Common. Import a flock of ill-behaved pigeons, strew a few truckloads of rubbish around to make the place look homey, and provide wholesome occupation for your scavengers, and set up a public address system with horns honking and sirens yowling. You might have a cop stroll through the grounds and pinch someone for loitering every now and then," Jem added as an afterthought. "And pump whiffs of exhaust fumes through the house during rush hours. It would cost you a damn sight less than rebuilding that warehouse."
"Yes, but the noise of Great-Uncle Frederick's ghost thumping around the hallways in a tantrum would scare them out in no time," Sarah objected. "Besides, your neighbors would be sending their gardeners over here with jackhammers to tear up the asphalt. I'm sorry, Mary, I made a silly suggestion. Even if the SCRC people would come, can you imagine what would happen in this neighborhood if you tried to upset the status quo?"
"The status hasn't been all that goddamn quo since the second Roosevelt administration," snarled Dolph.
"Now, dear, you know what the doctor warned you about Roosevelt the last time he checked your blood pressure," Mary interrupted. "Anyway, you're a social reformer yourself now."
"Like hell I am."
"Like hell you're not. Yes, Henrietta, what is it?" "Mr. Loveday's on the phone," said the maid. "He needs to speak to Mr. Kelling right away." "Mr. Loveday?" said Sarah. "I thought you'd pensioned him off when Great-Uncle Frederick died. Don't tell me you've got him working for you now, Dolph."
"Why should I pay Osmond Loveday money for doing nothing? He's a damn sight younger than I am. Uncle Fred hired him straight out of college, don't ask me why. I was already full-time whipping boy. Anyway, Osmond used to handle the books for those ridiculous foundations Uncle Fred kept setting up, so I've been keeping him on to help me dissolve them, which we've pretty well succeeded in doing, thank God. Now Osmond's working almost full-time for the SCRC. He's liaison man with the recycling plants, pays the bills, keeps track of the membership lists, all that sort of thing. He's a blasted fuss budget, but he's capable enough in his way."
"You'd better go see what he wants, dear," Mary suggested mildly.
"Huh. Probably mislaid a decimal point somewhere and wants me to help him hunt for it. Back in a minute, everybody."
Adolphus Kelling was a big man, tall as well as broad. He hefted himself out of the oversized wing chair he'd been sitting in and marched from his great-aunt's drawing-room like a man well-trained to do his duty in that sphere of life to which he had been summoned. Mary watched him go, the wrinkles deepening around her still lovely blue eyes. "What's happening now, I wonder? It's not like Osmond Loveday to bother us at this hour on a Sunday night. The center's not open. I'm surprised he's even awake. Osmond's one of those early-to-bed fellows. He gets up at the crack of dawn and takes walks in the public gardens."
"Ought to be exterminated, all of 'em,"
grunted Jem, who never walked any farther than the nearest martini if he could help it.
"Setting a bad example to the youth of America."
Cousin Theonia adjusted the lace flounces over her comely wrists and moved the conversation to a less controversial plane, as was her wont. "Dolph looks wonderful, Mary. You must be taking splendid care of him." "I try to." Mary's pleasant face became, for the moment, almost as beautiful as Theonia's. "The Lord knows Dolph's been a good husband to me." "Why, Mary," teased Sarah, "a person might think you were absolutely batty about him." "And did you think I'd married him for his money?" Mary's Irish was up. "If you want the honest truth, I'd had a crush on Dolph since I heard him speak that time at the West End Senior Citizens. I couldn't believe my good luck when I met him at your house not long after that, and he asked me to have dinner with him at the Ritz. I felt like Cinderella meeting the prince." Jem made a spluttering noise he didn't quite manage to cover up. Mary turned on him. "Oh, I know Dolph's no Rudolph Valentino. He acts kind of pompous sometimes, and I'm not saying he's any great intellect compared to his smart relatives, meaning no offense to yourself, Jem, since you've been so nice about coming to the center and singing dirty songs to the old ladies, God bless 'em. But Dolph honestly does believe it's his bounden duty to do some good in the world. It shines right out of him. If you were a person with nothing in this world to hang on to, and here came this big, important, rich man willing to treat you like one of his own and help you put food in your mouth and money in your pocket." She had to pause. Then she went on, almost fiercely. "Well, I'm not the only one who loves him. Down at the center they think he's God, or darn close to it. And you can laugh all you want to, Jem Kelling." "I shouldn't dream of laughing at you, Mary, me darling," Jem assured her, quite soberly for him. "Any man who managed to live with Aunt Matilda and Uncle Fred all those years, without bopping either one of them over the head, in a house strewn with articles admirably designed for bopping, should ipso facto become a candidate for sainthood, in my considered opinion. And now he tells us he's still putting up with that perambulating pipsqueak Osmond Loveday. Remind me to step around to the Cowley Fathers and take up the question of beatification first thing tomorrow morning, will you, Sarah? On second thought, you'd better make it sometime during the afternoon. Ah, here comes his potential holiness now. What's up, Adolphus?" Chapter 2. What was up was nothing good. They all knew that before Dolph opened his mouth. Mary reached up and took her husband's hand. "What's the matter, dear?"
"Chet Arthur got mugged."
"Oh, Dolph! Chet's been one of our regulars ever since we opened the center," Mary explained to the others. "Is he hurt, dear?"
"He's dead."
"Who?"
"I don't know, Mary. Somebody noticed him lying in the alley between Beacon and Marlborough Streets, down near Massachusetts Avenue end. They thought he must be drunk and called the police. The only identification he had on him was his SCRC membership card, so the police tried to call the center and got the emergency number, which is Osmond's, because he's nearest."
"And Osmond flew into a tizzy and started pestering you. What does he expect us to do about it?"
"Well, damn it, Mary, somebody has to go over to the morgue and identify the body."
"Why can't Osmond go himself? He's right there in town, for goodness sake."
"He says he's not feeling well. Neither am I, but what the hell? Sorry, everybody, don't let me break up the party."
Max Bittersohn was already on his feet.
"Come on, Dolph. I know you hate driving in the dark. I'll drive your car, and the rest can go in mine when they're ready to leave."
"I'm going with you," said Sarah. The upshot, of course, was that everybody went except Mary. "You won't mind going with Max, will you, Dolph? I really ought to stay and help Genevieve clean up the kitchen. She must be tired." Sarah doubted that. Genevieve had put in a good many years under Great-Aunt Matilda's iron heel. Working for Mary must be her idea of heaven. The truth of the matter was that Dolph was all geared up to spare the little woman and do his duty like a soldier, and Mary was too good a wife to crab his act. As they sorted themselves out for the ride, Sarah couldn't help thinking they were an unusual group to be so closely allied. Theonia, the raven-haired, slow-eyed, almost alarmingly well-mannered offspring of a gypsy mother and an Ivy League anthropology student who'd got more closely involved with his subject than he'd meant to, was perhaps the most exotic. Certainly she was the most striking to look at, and showed every intention of remaining so. Theonia still carried her height proudly, although she'd given up wearing high heels when she married Brooks. She walked every day to maintain a reasonable balance between her excellent appetite and her Rubenesque figure. During the daytime she dressed in simple black or dark red, with a modest string of pearls. At night she burgeoned forth in wondrous creations of her own. This being a brisk September evening, Theonia had put on a sumptuous wine-colored velvet dinner gown she'd first espied as a marked-down negligee in Filene's basement. She'd remodeled the velvet to follow the lines of her expensive foundation garment, and trimmed it with creamy lace taken from what would have been called a teddy by Sarah's late mother-in-law, to whom the teddy had once belonged. Such a gown really called for a sable cloak, Sarah thought. In deference to Brooks's views on the wanton slaughter of fur-bearing mammals for human adornment, however, Theonia had bought 3 yards of black woolen coating material and made herself a stole. With this draped carefully over her high-piled hair and flung around all that lace and velvet, she rather suggested a middle-aged Tosca on her way to stab Baron Scarpia. Brooks Kelling, standing 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighing perhaps 130 pounds, might have been considered a laughable consort to so queenly a spouse, but nobody laughed at Brooks. Something about him put one in mind of those unassuming chaps John Buchan used to write about. The ones who could speak fluently any obscure foreign dialect that happened to serve the immediate purpose, could contrive an impenetrable disguise with a handful of dust and a trick of the mind, could construct any required device from whatever bits and pieces might lie at hand, could endure any hardship or face any peril with a hymn on their lips and a Sunday-school text in their hearts, could effect the downfall of the Schwarzestein at the precise moment when it appeared to be inevitably in der Siegeskreuz, then go back to scratching the backs of their pedigreed pigs and taking 20-mile strolls across the moors with Carlyle's Essay on Burns for company. Brooks was a photographer of ospreys' nests and a former entertainer at children's birthday parties. He could build almost anything, but was inclined to be fussy about his materials. He spoke only Andover Harvard and had no trouble making himself perfectly understood in it anywhere, under any circumstances. He altered his appearance by wearing a straw boater with a feather of the crested grebe tucked into the hatband during the summer, and a greenish-gray felt hat with a feather of the ruddy turnstone in the winter. The only perils he'd ever quailed at were bossy widows who wanted to marry him, but Theonia had relieved him of those. The Schwarzestein wouldn't have got to first base with Brooks Kelling, and had never been known to try. Jeremy Kelling was about Brooks's height and roughly twice his girth. There was a cousinly resemblance between them, but Sarah could never have pictured Uncle Jem photographing an osprey's nest, or thwarting the Schwarzestein or anybody else by agility or guile. He might, she supposed, succeed in paralyzing a foe with a jug of his special formula martinis. More likely he'd yell for his man Egbert to handle the matter. Lately, to Sarah's annoyance, he'd taken to yelling for Max. In Sarah's personal opinion, Max Bittersohn was far and away the most distinguished member of the group. She could well believe his ancestors had been priests in the Temple of Solomon, while the Kellings were still painting themselves blue and being nasty to the Picts. Max was just about 6 feet tall and looked less than the 40 years he'd soon have attained. His dark brown hair had a marvelous wave to it. His gray-blue eyes saw a great deal more than most people realized they did. Lately, the expression on Max's handsome, though by no means pretty face, had been often anxious. That was due to impending fatherhood. Normally, Max was a cheerful man, though never boisterous like Jem. By profession, Max was a private detective specializing in the recovery of precious art objects. Recently, he'd developed a sideline, fishing members of the enormous Kelling tribe out of hot water. Sarah herself had been Max's first Kelling catch, and the only one he'd never felt any urge to throw back. She was small and slight like Brooks, had a modified version of the square Kelling jaw, but had mercifully escaped the Kelling nose. Her hair was brown, much lighter than Max's, and was showing a tendency to curl now that she'd had it cut short. Her skin was delicate and inclined to be pale except when she blushed. She was still under 30, and as happy as an expectant mother could be, considering how many relatives' good advice she had to endure. The luxurious car Max drove was his only step in the direction of ostentation, and not much of one at that, since he used it often on business, needed plenty of trunk space to bring back the rescued Rembrandts, and dealt mostly with rich clients who expected him to look successful. Dolph plunked himself down in the front passenger seat without waiting to be asked. Sarah shrugged, slid under the steering wheel, and put her feet up on the hump in the middle. Max checked to make sure his impending offspring was in no danger of being squashed, then took his place behind the wheel. Theonia sat in back with Brooks on her right and Jem on her left, like a hybrid tea rose between two Boston baked beans. All but Dolph lived on Beacon Hill. Jem shared a memento-filled flat on Pinckney Street with his long-suffering henchman Egbert. Brooks and Theonia were at present managing the historic brownstone on Tulip Street that Sarah had inherited from her first husband, Alexander Kelling, and then had turned into a remarkably high-toned boarding house. Sarah herself had retreated with Max to a small apartment next door while waiting for their new house at Ireson's Landing to be finished. At this time of night it was about a 20-minute run from Chestnut Hill. Max made it in 15. "I'll drop the rest of you at the boarding house and get Sarah up to bed before Dolph and I go on to the morgue, if that's okay." "I don't want to go to bed," Sarah protested.
"Then stay with us till Max gets back. Mothers-to-be must be humored," said Theonia.
Theonia herself had never been a mother, but she had a way of investing her pronouncements with an authority it would have seemed folly to question. She might have acquired the knack during her earlier career as a tea-leaf reader, but anyway, Max yielded. Sarah went into the house with the rest and accepted a glass of hot milk in deference to her delicate condition. Jem asked for black coffee. Brooks and Theonia drank something called snoozy-by tea, and thus it was that Max found them when he got back from his direful errand.
"It was Arthur, all right," he told them. "Dolph's pretty cut up. This is the first violent death they've had among the SCRC members, and he's blaming himself. He thinks it wouldn't have happened if he'd got that warehouse remodeled sooner."
"Poor Dolph," said Sarah. "Mary's right about him, you know. Where is he now?"
"I ran him back to Chestnut Hill. We weren't long at the morgue. There was nothing to stay for. Dolph promised to send an undertaker around in the morning, and they presented us with Arthur's personal effects." He held up a worn and ripped brown paper shopping bag with SCRC stamped in big green letters on one side. "This is it, except for the membership card in his pocket and the clothes on his back. He'd been hit over the head from behind with a tire iron, which was left at the scene. Dolph thinks he might have had a little money on him. Arthur was a conscientious collector and came in with a bunch of bottles and cans to be redeemed every day. The cops who picked him up said there were maybe a dozen empty soft drink cans scattered around the body, presumably from the torn bag."
"Died with his boots on, eh?" said Brooks. "I suppose there might be worse ways for a person in his situation to go. Will there be a funeral?"
"Oh, yes, it's a perquisite of membership. The members are all elderly, you know, so they lose one to Father Time every so often, and they always make a point of giving them a decent send-off. Dolph says it was Mary's idea. Maybe it doesn't help the dead person much, but it makes the rest feel better. They go to a community church nearby. One of their members, who used to be a janitor in a church or something, conducts a non-sectarian service. Then they troop back to the center for coffee and cake."
"How perceptive of dear Mary," said Theonia softly. "Letting those dear people know they'll be decently cared for even after they're gone. Brooks, darling, do you think I ought to bake something?"
"Why don't you check with Mary in the morning, my dear? She'll know better than I. Max, can I offer you something? Tea? Brandy?"
"Brandy, if you don't mind. I could use it." Max was fiddling with the tattered shopping bag. Poor bugger. Hadn't a damn thing but this, and some son of a bitch wouldn't even let him keep it. I suppose these printed bags were Mary's idea, too.
"No, I think they were Dolph's," said Sarah. "Look out, Max, there's sugar or something dribbling out on the rug."
"Sugar?"
"One takes it, you know," said Theonia. "Those little packets they put out at lunch counters. The extra carbohydrates help get one through the night if one has to sleep in a cold doorway."
Max nodded, but he didn't seem to be listening. He'd spread a newspaper over the library table and laid the bag on top. Now he was ripping the folds apart, finding a few grains still caught inside. "Got something we can examine it with, Brooks?"
Just a second.
Brooks ran lightly up the elegantly proportioned but rather steep and narrow staircase.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?